Hello, and welcome to the turbulent world with me, James M. Dorsey, as your host. With Donald Trump 2 weeks away from returning to the White House, Iran and its Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, IRGC, fear that recent setbacks could open a Pandora's box. Israel's puncturing of Swiss cheese sized holes in the Iran backed axis of resistance has upended the Islamic Republic's forward defense strategy, raised questions about the future of the IRGC's Quds force, its foreign operations arm, and risks turning Iran into a tradable geopolitical commodity. In addition, Israeli retaliatory strikes severely damaged Iran's anti air defenses, making the country more vulnerable to attack. The Axis group ousted President Bashar al Assad's Syria, Lebanese Shiite militia Hezbollah, the grouping's erstwhile crown jewel, Iraqi Shiite paramilitaries, Hamas, and Yemen's Houthi rebels. With the loss of Syria and the substantial weakening of Hezbollah, the Axis is a shadow of itself. Syria and Hezbollah constituted the Axis's backbone because they shared borders with Israel, which allowed them to retaliate for potential Israeli strikes against Iran. The loss of Syria and the weakening of Hezbollah leaves the Houthis, alongside Iran itself, as the only credible antidotes to Israel and U.S. influence in the region. Graffiti calling for a free Iran on the facade of the Iranian embassy in Damascus illustrates the state of relations between Iran and post al Assad Syria. For Iran, Israel's puncturing of the Axis put a higher premium on other pillars of the Islamic Republic's defense strategy, including its ballistic missile and nuclear programs. Iran is mulling weaponizing its nuclear program to compensate for the loss, for all practical purposes, of the Axis as its forward defense line. Israeli and Western officials fear that Russia could award Iran for its support in the Ukraine war by supplying it with technology to utilize enriched uranium in a nuclear warhead. On the flip side, Iranian officials worry that Russian President Vladimir Putin could sweeten Mr. Trump's determination to end the Ukraine war by offering to halt Russia's support for Iran in exchange for U.S. pressure on Ukraine to concede territory and drop its quest for NATO membership. On a visit to Paris last month, Mr. Trump called for an immediate ceasefire in Ukraine after separate talks with French President Emmanuel Macron and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Russia and Iran are in a weakened state right now, one because of Ukraine and a bad economy, the other because of Israel and its fighting success. Likewise, Zelensky and Ukraine would like to make a deal and stop the madness. There should be an immediate ceasefire and negotiations should begin, Mr. Trump said. The fate of the Lebanon ceasefire that ended 13 months of hostilities between Israel and Hezbollah and obliged the group to withdraw 30 kilometers north of the Lebanese-Israeli border by January 27 could prove to be a litmus test of how Iran handles its changed circumstances. Like Hezbollah, Israel is scheduled to pull its troops out of Lebanon by the end of January. Even so, Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz warned that the agreement would collapse if Hezbollah failed to comply. Israel will continue to enforce the ceasefire fully and without compromise in order to ensure the safe return of northern residents to their homes, Mr. Katz said, referring to tens of thousands of Israelis evacuated from their homes because of the hostilities. Mr. Katz spoke in response to Hezbollah leader Naim Qasem's insistence that it was up to the group to decide whether or not it would abide by the ceasefire stipulations. Our patience regarding Israeli violations of the ceasefire might run out, or it may persist as it is now. And when we decide to act, you will see it immediately, Mr. Qasim said. Veteran Middle East affairs analyst Ehud Yari predicted that the Lebanon ceasefire would fray, with Hezbollah refusing to disarm and Israel continuing to operate on the Lebanese side of the border. Even so, Mr. Yari suggested Hezbollah will keep tension on a low boil. Hezbollah, however humiliated it may be, will not surrender its weapons to the authorities. As a result, the working assumption is that the holes in the ceasefire agreement will continue to grow. The Israel Defense Forces will continue to strike at any attempt by Hezbollah to reorganize, Mr. Yari said. It's unclear whether Iran would support Hezbollah in a renewed confrontation with Israel, and how it would do so if it decides to intervene. The loss of Syria has deprived Iran of its prime funnel for the supply of arms and funds to Hezbollah. Moreover, overt support for Hezbollah's collapse of the ceasefire would complicate its efforts to persuade the incoming Trump administration to engage with the Islamic Republic to get crippling U.S. economic sanctions lifted. Iran's setback raises questions about the Quds forces' utility 5 years after the U.S. assassinated Qasem Soleimani, the Revolutionary Guard unit's charismatic commander. Syria could provide the answer. Against the backdrop of concern about their place in post al Assad Syria among Alawites, the Shiite Muslim sect from which Mr. al Assad hails, the Revolutionary Guard is mulling supporting potentially armed resistance against the country's new rulers. Meanwhile, Quds Force Commander Ismail Qani rushed to Baghdad to counter U.S. pressure on Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani to rein in tens of Iranian-backed Iraqi Shiite militias operating under the umbrella of the Popular Mobilization Forces. At a ceremony this week to mark the 5th anniversary of the killing of Mr. Soleimani and a prominent Iranian-backed militia commander, Mr. al-Sudani prided himself on keeping Iraq out of the Middle East's various conflicts. Iraqi officials and militia commanders said Mr. Qani was discussing a reorganization of the Iran-backed armed groups. The reorganization could involve disbanding some of the groups or converting them into exclusively unarmed political organizations. The Revolutionary Guards fear that instability in Syria could spill into Iraq, with the Islamic State using the country as a launching pad for attacks in Iraq. Mr. Qani arrived days before Mr. al-Sudani was scheduled to visit Iran. Although normally reporting to Mr. al-Sudani as part of the Iraqi military, the Popular Mobilization Forces operate independently. The forces agreed in December to halt attacks on Israel after launching dozens of drones at the Jewish state since the Gaza war erupted on October 7. The forces have since withdrawn from the Iraqi-Syrian border. The agreement leaves the Houthis as the only Iranian-backed group still confronting Israel with frequent, ineffective missile attacks. In an intriguing development, Mr. Qani also met with Mazloum Abdi, the commander of the U.S.-backed predominantly Kurdish Syrian Democratic Forces, SDF. It was unclear where the two men met. The SDF is battling the Turkish-backed Syrian National Army, an amalgam of 40 rebel groups. Last week, Syria's new leader, Ahmed al-Shara, engaged for the first time with the SDF, the U.S. military's shock troops in the fight against the Islamic State. In contrast to the Syrian National Army, Mr. al-Shara did not include the SDF in a recent agreement among rebel groups to disarm and integrate into a reconstituted Syrian military. The SDF's quest for Kurdish autonomy within a federated Syria puts it at odds with Mr. al-Shara and neighboring Turkey's insistence that Syria should be a centralized state. Turkey has created a buffer zone in northern Syria to push the SDF, which it has designated as a terrorist organization, back from the Turkish-Syrian border. Iran has maintained good ties with the SDF in a context in which Turkey is ascendant in Syria and the US withdraws under Trump. The SDF could form a mutually beneficial partnership, a vector for Iran to re-exert influence there, said analyst Farzan Sabit, reinforcing indications Iran may see the support of disaffected minorities in Syria as a way of compensating for its recent setbacks. In a twist of irony, support for the Kurds would not only align Iran with the United States, but also with Israel. Rouhani TV, a Syrian Kurdish broadcaster, reported that Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar had given positive guarantees to the rights of the Kurds. It was unclear what the guarantees entailed. Last month, Mr. Sa'ar described the Kurds as Israel's natural allies. Thank you for joining me today. If you appreciate hard-hitting, fact-based analysis, please consider upgrading to a paid Substack subscription or gifting a subscription to help ensure that independent journalism and analysis survives. Without your support, hard-hitting, fact-based analysis would not be possible. Substack subscribers get exclusive early access to the text, podcast, and video days before it is released on other platforms. Subscribers also have access to the full archive, exclusive posts and polling, can leave comments, join debates, and know they are supporting independent writing, reporting, and analysis that lets the chips fall where they fall. You can contribute by going to jamesmdorsey.substack.com and choosing one of the subscription options. Thank you for your support and loyalty. Take care and best wishes for the new year.